Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful today. Who was responsible for Grace's $1 million scam? Family crime is nothing new to Grace Buckingham. Bold and Beautiful's criminal element is nothing new to Grace Buckingham. Dr. Reese Buckingham, her ex-husband, was incarcerated for a horrifying crime. After delivering Hope Logan's baby alive, he told Hope that her kid was dead and replaced it with a stillborn child from another mother. Even though Grace wasn't married to Reese at the time, she probably had some idea of what he was capable of. Steffy Forrester was then defrauded by Reese after she spent a lot of money adopting the child. Steffy was unaware that this was Hope's child. Rather, Reese claimed that a mother who was unable to care for the child gave up the baby. Additionally, he created a phony mother for Steffy to meet. In order to adopt the child, he conned Steffy out of a huge sum of money, and nobody realized it was the daughter of Hope and Liam Spencer. The rest is the history of Bold and the Beautiful, since Liam and Hope were able to retrieve their child. However, is Grace capable of defrauding Liam of a remedy for his tumor death sentence? BNB, what fear does Grace have? Even though it appears like Grace Buckingham is involved in a fraud, she doesn't seem like the criminal type, and perhaps she isn't, even though she had an ex-husband who did a terrible crime. Perhaps Grace is being blackmailed on Bold and the Beautiful, but who knows? Paris Buckingham and Zoe Buckingham are Grace's two grown daughters. When Zoe appeared on the screen of Bold and the Beautiful, she was a little cunning. When we last heard from Paris, she was working at Forrester Creations International in France and living with Thomas Forrester. Thus, did Grace create this multi-million-dollar fraud to save one of her daughters who might be in danger? Or even Reese, since nobody would be surprised if he lied and conned his way into such a scheme by possibly persuading Grace that he would die without this money. Is he using Grace to get this money, then? Whatever is happening, Grace appears to be suffering, and it appears that this deception is killing her. It appears that she doesn't want to do this based on her response on Bold and the Beautiful this week. Good gone bad, Bold and the Beautiful? Did Grace Buckingham, like her ex-husband Reese, suddenly become a scammer? Most likely not, given that she seemed to be in a state of despair following her receipt of the money from Bill. Then we find out that she transferred the whole $1 million to a different party. Therefore, she had no intention of keeping the money for herself. The teasers for the Bold and the Beautiful tell us that this week, her entire world falls apart. Both Finn's and Bridget Forrester's suspicions increase. Liam Spencer's miraculous remedy seems suspicious to both of them. When Bridget begins to inquire about the process, Grace Buckingham chews off her head. Finn tried to discuss it with Bill Spencer, but he was too thrilled that Liam had been spared to see where Finn was taking the subject. And that's because Grace's statements don't seem plausible. Although many fans believe that Reese is back in the picture and forcing Grace to do something against her will, no one has been able to provide a reason for this hypothesis. It would have to be pretty terrible for her to go this far, unless Reese has something on Grace that she wants to keep private. Grace Buckingham's recent, gut-wrenching meltdown, culminating in her central role in a devastating $1 million scam targeting Bill Spencer and exploiting Liam Spencer's terminal diagnosis, isn't merely a sudden descent into villainy, it's the catastrophic collapse of a woman ensnared in a web spun from her own traumatic past, palpable fear, and an overwhelming, unseen pressure that cracks her very foundation. This isn't the calculated malice of a born criminal, it's the desperate flailing of a drowning woman, forced to betray her own principles to appease some terrifying, external force, likely tethered directly to the darkest chapter of her life, her ex-husband, the monstrous Dr. Reese Buckingham. Grace is no stranger to the criminal element. Reese's heinous act of delivering Hope Logan's baby alive only to swap her with a stillborn infant and declare her child dead, then perpetrating an elaborate, heartless scam on Steffy Forrester by selling her that very same baby under false pretenses for a fortune, casts a long, toxic shadow over her existence. While Grace wasn't married to Reese during that specific atrocity, the intimate knowledge of his capacity for such profound cruelty, the shared history and likely awareness of his manipulative, unscrupulous nature on some level, lingers like a persistent stain. Reese proved himself capable of exploiting the deepest human vulnerabilities, the loss of a child, the desperate desire for cold, hard cash. Now, the chilling question hangs heavy: has that same predatory instinct, perhaps wielded directly by Reese or leveraging his influence, ensnared Grace in a scheme targeting another life-or-death vulnerability, Liam's brain tumor, exploiting Bill Spencer's frantic paternal love and willingness to pay any price for a cure. The parallels are too stark to ignore: a medical professional, a life-altering deception, a massive financial payout, suggesting Reese's specter looms large over this new scandal. Yet, crucially, Grace Buckingham herself radiates not the cold confidence of a con artist, but the raw, visible agony of a victim. She doesn't embody the criminal type, she embodies profound despair. Her every reaction, particularly after receiving the life-altering sum from Bill, screams of internal torment. Witnessing her visceral distress this week wasn't observing a greedy schemer counting her ill-gotten gains, it was witnessing a soul in excruciating pain, performing an act that violates her very core. This anguish is the core of her meltdown, the unbearable weight of participating in a fraud she clearly detests. The mechanics of the scam only deepen the mystery and underscore her likely role as a pawn. She immediately transferred the entire $1 million to another party. This wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme for Grace, this was a transaction demanded by an unseen puppeteer. So, who holds the strings, and what leverage could possibly compel Grace to such extremes? The theory's swirling point inexorably towards her vulnerabilities: her family. Her daughters, Zoe and Paris Buckingham, represent her heart. Zoe's past deviousness on the show proves a capacity for moral flexibility, while Paris, last known working alongside Thomas Forrester in France, inhabits the powerful, potentially dangerous world of the Forresters. Is one of her daughters in dire, potentially life-threatening trouble? Did Grace, facing an impossible ultimatum, concoct this desperate plan to ransom her child's safety or future? The fear in her eyes suggests a maternal terror powerful enough to override her conscience. However, the most compelling, and perhaps most terrifying, suspect remains Reese Buckingham himself. Would anyone put it past the man who trafficked an infant to lie, manipulate, and emotionally blackmail his ex-wife? The scenario writes itself: Reese, potentially destitute, ill, or simply reverting to his predatory nature, contacts Grace. He spins a tale of imminent death, catastrophic consequences, or possesses some damning secret from their shared past, something pretty horrific, as the narrative suggests, and threatens exposure or ruin unless she secures him $1 million. He weaponizes her residual guilt, her fear of scandal impacting her daughters, or simply exploits the lingering emotional connection he might still manipulate. Reese knows Grace, he knows her weaknesses, her love for her children, her desire for respectability after the shame he brought upon their family name. He could easily frame this as her penance or her only option to prevent an even greater catastrophe he claims to orchestrate. Grace, cornered and terrified, sees no escape but compliance, leading to the excruciating performance of selling a fake, miraculous cure for Liam's tumor to a desperate Bill. The mounting pressure from those suspicious of the miracle cure, Finn's growing medical skepticism, Bridget Forrester's pointed questions born of professional duty and familial concern, only intensifies Grace's panic, fueling her meltdown. Her sharp, uncharacteristic rebuke of Bridget isn't the reaction of a confident fraudster, it's the defensive lash-out of someone terrified the flimsy facade is about to implode. Finn's attempt to warn Bill falls on deaf ears, drowned out by Bill's euphoric relief, leaving Grace momentarily reprieved but isolated on an increasingly precarious ledge. The previews promising her world crashing down signal the inevitable exposure, but the true tragedy lies not just in the scam's revelation, but in the destruction of Grace Buckingham's integrity and peace. Her meltdown is the visible eruption of that internal volcano, the guilt, the fear, the shame of betraying her oath, her friends, like Bridget, and her own moral compass. It's the sound of a woman breaking under the weight of an impossible choice likely forced upon her by the very man whose past crimes continue to poison her present. Whether the ultimate beneficiary is Reese, a daughter in peril, or some other hidden threat, Grace Buckingham's $1 million meltdown is ultimately a portrait of profound victimization. She's not the mastermind, she's the shattered instrument, demonstrating how the sins of the past, particularly those committed by someone as toxic as Reese Buckingham, can reach forward with devastating claws to destroy even those who tried to move on. Her anguish is the show's most potent clue. This scam is her personal hell, a path she walks not towards profit, but away from some unimaginable consequence orchestrated by a shadow from her darkest days. The $1 million wasn't her goal, it was the terrifying ransom demanded for a semblance of safety she now knows was always an illusion, culminating in a public unraveling that lays bare the devastating cost of being entangled in Reese Buckingham's enduring legacy of deceit. Bill is no longer in Liam's life after 3 strikes? Bill cannot claim all the glory. All he did was give the $1 million to Dr. Grace Buckingham. However, Liam may have a new perspective on his father after learning the truth about his amazing recovery. B&B supporters claim that Bill and Liam have already had 3 run-ins. On one soap message board, a fan described each strike. Bill's decision to release Sheila from prison in spite of her attempt to kill Steffi and Finn was the first strike. Bill endangered Liam's daughter in addition to their family. Bill then put Luna under house arrest at the Spencer mansion after releasing her from prison. She shot both her grandmother and his son, so that went terribly wrong. The third strike, what is it? Liam's life was saved by the expensive procedure. Without questioning this experimental surgery or batting an eye, Bill paid Grace $1 million to save his son's life. He didn't conduct his own research or seek a second viewpoint. Additionally, despite having the means and wealth to do so, Bill chose not to investigate the backgrounds of the participating surgeons and physicians. The original poster's conclusion read, "He's the dumbest man on earth, despite owning multiple magazines and being a multimillionaire." Some admirers contended that because Bill inherited his father's media business, he is not a self-made billionaire. Other fans, meanwhile, believe Grace defrauded Bill of his money. When she got the money, she appeared guilty. After Bill thanked her, she felt bad since it's possible that Liam wasn't dying from a tumor or that he's still dying from an inoperable tumor. Some fans countered that Grace's remarks regarding Liam's health shouldn't be attributed to Bill. It was she who found out that he had an inoperable brain tumor with no chance of recovery. Bill had the chance to save his son's life. I concur. Bill has been having a lot of success. One fan remarked, "I just hope Liam won't be any worse off for his recent lack of judgment." Will there be dangers and complications from this procedure? What if Liam has a difficult time recovering? It's possible that someone other than Liam will be upset. When Bill learns about Grace's plan, it might be him. One admirer wrote, "I think Bill will care much more about the months of suffering Grace put his son through than he will about $1 million. What do you think? When Liam finds out the truth about Bill's surgery, do you think he'll give up on him? Please share your thoughts in the comments box below. Bill Spencer, a man whose wealth is as vast as his capacity for catastrophic misjudgment, and the cumulative weight of his latest actions, crystallized by furious fans into the damning framework of 3 strikes, threatens not just his relationship with his son Liam, but the very foundation of whatever fragile trust remained between them, pushing Liam towards an irrevocable decision to sever ties completely, a decision fueled not merely by the staggering $1 million price tag paid to the enigmatic Dr. Grace Buckingham for Liam's life-saving surgery, but by the terrifying pattern of reckless endangerment and profound negligence that defines Bill's recent history, a pattern where each strike reveals a deeper flaw in his character, a willingness to gamble with the lives of those Liam holds dearest, culminating in a desperate, blind gamble with Liam's own life that feels less like an act of love and more like the final, unforgivable betrayal in a series of escalating disasters. The first strike, a foundational sin against family loyalty and safety, saw Bill leverage his considerable power and influence not for protection, but for profound peril, orchestrating the release of Sheila Carter, a woman whose name is synonymous with psychotic violence on the Los Angeles scene, a woman who had attempted to murder Steffi Forrester and John Finn Finnegan, Liam's former wife and her husband, individuals central to the emotional world of Liam's young daughter, Kelly. Bill's actions weren't just a betrayal of Steffi and Finn, who deserved justice and safety, they were a direct assault on Liam's sense of security for his child, placing Kelly, Steffi, and Finn back in the crosshairs of a known, relentless predator purely to serve Bill's own murky, self-serving agenda, demonstrating a chilling disregard for the most fundamental paternal duty, the safety of one's child and grandchild. If the first strike endangered Liam's daughter and fractured his trust, the second strike brought the danger horrifyingly close to home, literally and figuratively, when Bill intervened to release Luna Nozawa from legal custody, subsequently confining her not to a secure facility, but under house arrest within the supposed sanctuary of the Spencer estate itself. This decision, breathtaking in its lack of foresight and basic common sense, exploded with tragic consequences when Luna, under immense psychological strain within those very walls, discharged a firearm, grievously wounding Bill's own son, Will Spencer, Liam's beloved younger half-brother, and Poppy Nozawa, Luna's grandmother. This wasn't just another Spencer scandal, it was domestic carnage orchestrated by Bill's arrogant belief that he could control uncontrollable situations and people, resulting in physical trauma to Will and emotional trauma to Liam, who witnessed his brother nearly killed because of their father's hubris, shattering any illusion that Bill's actions, however well-intentioned he might claim, prioritized the actual well-being of his family. The third strike, however, cuts deepest, transforming Bill from a dangerously meddling patriarch into a figure of potentially lethal negligence. The $1 million payment to Dr. Grace Buckingham for an experimental, high-risk surgery to save Liam from a supposedly inoperable brain tumor. While the primal urge to save one's child is undeniable, the manner in which Bill executed this rescue is indefensible. He didn't seek a second opinion from other leading neurosurgeons. He didn't leverage his vast wealth and resources to conduct thorough due diligence on Dr. Buckingham, her credentials, her research, or the viability of her experimental procedure. He didn't investigate the team involved. He simply wrote a check for a staggering sum, blinded by desperation and perhaps his own sense of invincibility, accepting Buckingham's dire prognosis and miraculous solution without question. As one incensed fan bluntly declared, for being a multimillionaire and owner of numerous magazines, he's the dumbest man on earth, a sentiment amplified by others who point to Bill's inherited empire as evidence he lacks the acumen of a true self-made titan, rendering his lack of basic investigative steps even more egregious. This third strike transcends recklessness. It exposes Liam, vulnerable and trusting his father in a moment of life or death, to unknown and potentially horrific risks. The surgery itself, shrouded in mystery, could have unforeseen complications or long-term consequences. The recovery could be arduous and painful. And crucially, the entire premise Buckingham sold Bill is now under intense suspicion. Fans keenly observed Buckingham's palpable guilt after receiving the payment, sparking theories that Liam may never have been terminally ill at all, that the tumor was either non-existent or operable by conventional means, making Bill not a savior but an unwitting mark in a $1 million scam that subjected his son to unnecessary, invasive brain surgery. Alternatively, the tumor might be real but still inoperable and fatal, meaning Buckingham took the money knowing she offered false hope, leaving Liam to potentially suffer and die anyway, a cruelty compounded by Bill's blind payment. While some defenders argue Bill shouldn't be blamed for Buckingham's initial diagnosis, he was presented with a horrifying choice and took the only option offered to save his son. This defense crumbles under the weight of his utter failure to verify anything. He didn't act as a responsible parent or a savvy businessman, he acted as a panicked fool with a checkbook, outsourcing his son's life to a stranger without scrutiny. The potential fallout is a minefield for Liam's psyche and physical health. Learning his survival hinged on an unvetted, potentially fraudulent procedure paid for by a father whose previous actions endangered his daughter and nearly got his brother killed could trigger profound rage, betrayal, and trauma. As one fan astutely noted, Liam might not be the only one furious. $1 million is really nothing to Bill, he's going to care much more about the months of suffering Grace put his son through, I think. If the surgery leads to complications, chronic pain, cognitive issues, or if the tumor returns, Bill's culpability will be undeniable and devastating. Liam, who has weathered countless Spencer storms, may finally reach his breaking point. The three strikes form a devastating narrative arc. Strike 1 endangered Liam's child and ex-wife. Strike 2 nearly killed his brother within the family home. Strike 3 gambled recklessly with Liam's own life, body, and trust in a transaction devoid of due diligence, potentially exposing him to unnecessary suffering or even a fraudulent ordeal. Each strike erodes the bedrock of their relationship. Forgiveness for one catastrophic error might be possible, perhaps even for two. But 3? 3 strikes demonstrating a repeated, escalating pattern of putting Liam and his loved ones in harm's way through arrogance, poor judgment, and now, with the surgery, a fundamental failure of protective responsibility? This feels final. Liam learning the truth about the $1 million and the lack of scrutiny behind his miracle cure isn't just about the money or even the surgery itself, it's the glaring symbol of Bill's chronic inability to act with the care, intelligence, and genuine prioritization his son deserves. It crystallizes every past betrayal and present danger into an unforgivable whole. Bill may have paid to save Liam's life, but in doing so with such blind recklessness, he may have irrevocably cost himself his son. When Liam pieces together the full picture of these 3 strikes, the freed predator, the estate shooting, and the bought, unverified surgery, the likely outcome isn't reconciliation, it's exile. Bill Spencer, the man who moves mountains but crushes everything beneath them, may finally find himself permanently out of Liam's life.